Welcome to the Asbestos Knowledge Empire.
What does asbestos management mean to you?
I used to really struggle with the asbestos management at my site, but now it's a breeze.
It used to be really expensive. I was paying loads, but now I've got my asbestos power team in place. It's so much easier.
Asbestos can be a pain in the arse if not handled right.
We had to stop the job because asbestos was discovered. Now we don't have that problem.
Asbestos management is easier than you think. Asbestos management. Be proactive, not reactive. Think about asbestos first, not last.
And now your hosts, best-selling authors and asbestos experts, Ian Stone and Neil Munro.
Welcome to the Asbestos Knowledge Empire. I'm Ian Stone.
I'm Neil Munro.
So today we're talking about kind of reviewing stuff, reviewing where you perhaps think you're at. Discussion recently with a client when we were going through the asbestos antidote with them. Basically, the first port of call of the asbestos antidote is a review. Kind of, we get to know about you, you get to know about us. It's looking at your data. It's kind of desktop study time when we just review everything of where you're at. And it kind of came to light because it was where you think you're at. And this particular client, they weren't happy with their current supplier. They wanted a new supplier, and that's why they came to us. And it was funny because the conversation went along the lines of, what have you got? They showed us everything, got out their asset register list, and which compared up against their asbestos register list. And they basically said, look, we've got everything sorted. We just need you to come in and take over and do re-inspections for us. But as the conversation developed further and further and further, we did highlight the fact that there were a lot of areas around their property that weren't actually included on the asset register or indeed their asbestos register.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of thing. So to give context of what I'm talking about, you can have an office like our office and there's a bin store outside. Now, these are the type of things that they didn't have on their asset register because that bin store wasn't part of the building. Nobody worked there as such, but it was part of what they used for that property.
Yeah, I think you can kind of look at it as there's lots of other structures, areas, locations within a site which are not necessarily buildings as such. That's what we're kind of
they're buildings, not buildings.
Yeah. So to give you an example, like a carport.
Yes.
It's not a building. It's usually kind of something like 4 posts and a roof.
Yeah.
Bus stops. Bus stops are not technically a structure or building. A building, but they are a structure.
Yeah.
Which could, all these elements could contain asbestos materials.
Exactly, and that's
they're
the
on
point.
Your site.
Yeah, and it's, I don't know, think of other things like stables, horse stables, grandstands at horse racing facilities. You like some of the ones that I've been to, you just have a big concrete or a big metal structure, which is just the grandstand.
Yeah.
There's no offices there. There's no kind of, there's no food or bar facilities there. It's literally where people go and stand to get a higher elevation to watch the race. Yeah. Now, that's not, like you say,
it's not a building.
It's not a building, no.
Yeah.
However, it's a structure. And these are the type of things that, time and again, we find on client sites when we do the review that they haven't taken into consideration and they've not placed on their asbestos register.
Yeah. And so some more examples is, external gas cupboards.
Yeah.
Sometimes where you've got the mains coming into the site, you can sometimes get a tiny little cupboard, which may even be, just a foot high, stuff like that. Underground ducts.
Just going back to the gas cupboard one, that's an interesting one because, again, some sites don't believe that's theirs.
Yes.
Because, yes, it's on the corner of their property, and this is where the confusion comes in. Sometimes it is owned by you, the client, it's yours.
Yeah.
However, sometimes it is the utility company that own it. So you can see why there are confusion around definitely utilities and things like that coming into and on the corner of sites and stuff, definitely.
Yeah, and I was saying that sometimes underground ducts
are
forgotten about because they're not actually part of a building, particularly where you've got multiple buildings on a site. You may have an external boiler house which powers the whole site. And sometimes, because you can't see it, it's often forgotten about. And they are technically parts of the buildings.
Yeah, they are, definitely.
They service the buildings. And if anything, if you were to get a leak in a pipe, you'd have to access those. And yeah, there's lots of different examples, isn't there?
Just trying to reel off as many different possibilities. I don't know. Subways that people walk through. Again, it's not a building that you kind of sit in, chill in, hang out in, but it is a structure that may have potentially been constructed with asbestos, and that should appear on the asbestos register list.
Yeah, even random things like sheds.
Yes, definitely.
Old sheds that have sat at the edge of a site, a smoking shed.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That sort of thing where we've seen time and time again, it's been somebody's goal to make it as cosy and as pretty in the past as possible, and there's asbestos materials in them.
And that's the point, exactly. And that's exactly the point with this. It's like, you might think, oh, well, what's the issue with
It's just a wooden shed.
It's just a wooden shed. However, no, because time and again, we've done surveys and identified, like you just said, they've collected up boards or they made the footings with asbestos.
Yeah.
They've collected other stuff from around the site and just made like a little... I've seen... So you used to get precast asbestos flower pots.
Yeah.
Right, I'm not talking about those here. I'm talking about somebody that has made a little potted, like a raised flower bed, and the walls of that flower bed were asbestos. It was asbestos cement, and they've basically put it together, dug a little hole in the ground, put it together, filled it with everything, put some beautiful little plants and flowers in there, but it's asbestos. And because it's on your site and it's as part of your buildings and your assets, it needs managing. Rightly or wrongly that it should be there, it doesn't matter, it is there. And that's the point. There's all these different structures that you kind of think, well, it's just a grandstand. There's no asbestos there. Well, there are, because there's bitumen damp-proof coursings, there's shuttering that goes under the concrete for the precast. There's all these different areas and locations where asbestos kind of has been used. And to everybody who just thinks about it at first, oh yeah, but it's just that, it's just nothing. Like you said, it's just a shed. But we've found asbestos in these areas, 100%. Time and again.
100%. And that's not including kind of external equipment as well, which we haven't talked about.
Yeah.
You may have pipe runs, like external high-level pipe runs that connect into buildings. You may have kind of aerials or aerial structures that, you use for either, telly or radio or anything else. Those types of structures. There's lots of different sort of maintenance equipment that may be forgotten about.
Yeah, mast stations.
Masts, lots of different things like that. External generators.
Yeah, external generators, external generator rooms, emergency backup generators.
Yeah.
All these things. And like you say, when you think about them, it's not part of your normal day-to-day.
It's not the building.
It's not the building.
Yeah. Where everyone goes to. It's just kind of sometimes forgotten about locations which...
Yeah. Pump stations.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, if you've got water problems, you probably have pumps and stuff around the
sluice gates, pump stations, things like that. All sorts.
Water control sort of devices and stuff like that.
Yeah, and again, you're not going to be going to these sites. I don't know, not even once a year. Once every 5 years, some of them. They sit out there, and that's the beauty, like for pump stations, for instance, they sit out there in the middle of a field. I mean, over in kind of East Anglia, the Fens, all the rest of it, they have this because of the way that the Fens were constructed. And you have these pumping stations that keep the flat fields from flooding. And you've got a pump station, it's a pump house, they're built really simple pumps, really big pumps, and they inherently never go wrong because there's not many moving parts. They just work. So you have these pump stations that sit out in the middle of a farmer's field, and they're not looked at, touched, thought about for 5 years. However, it's still an asset, and somebody is still going to be going there at some point because, all right, they do last a while. However, somebody does need to go there and service them. If there is a problem and something happens, somebody needs to go there. And we need to make sure that these buildings, these areas, this equipment is all safe and it's all free from asbestos. Or if there is asbestos, it's in a safe condition. That's the kind of point of, it's all these little things that like you said, they're not part of the building, but they're part of how you run and what is needed in the overall picture of asbestos management.
Yeah, it's kind of taking a step back, looking at your complete operation as a business and all the locations that you own, operate, have access to. And that's another one. You know, if you've got employees which are accessing other people's properties, you need to make sure that what they're doing is safe as well, and asking for that information. You may need to incorporate that into your asbestos management.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good point, because if you're doing
You've got shared boundaries or shared, I don't know, access rights to certain buildings, properties, locations, you need to take that into consideration and in your overall asbestos management.
I've got an example of that. There was a school that I know about that's kind of it's local authority plus an independent now. So they've broken away. However, the local authority retained rights to the gym or the swimming pool or something,
Right.
and the school had everything else. So when you went to site, you essentially had 2 asbestos registers to look at, 2 things to look in, but it was really disjointed because you thought as soon as you were on site, you kind of had free reign. And if you didn't know this, you could go off and enter the swimming pool and do your works and stuff, and because it didn't appear in the front desk asbestos register because it was separate.
Yeah,
exactly, and that's it. So, but there was always a second asbestos register at the swimming pool, but there wasn't somebody manning the reception at the swimming pool because it was just like it wasn't like a public swimming bath. It was just a swimming pool. So once you're on site and you pass that initial gatekeeper, you can go and do what you like. But that didn't work, and that's the thing. You're totally right that you need that full information that needs to be brought into line, and you as an employer have got that responsibility to make sure that those things on client sites are okay for your staff to go onto.
Yeah, and the kind of example I was thinking about is sometimes businesses have a main site and then shared elements of different sites. And it's making sure that you don't forget about those shared elements, because for whatever reason within your tenancy agreements, you may be responsible for that one little office for the full maintenance and repair. And that would make you the duty holder of that one small office. And sometimes thinking because you're sharing it with somebody else that you're not responsible, and that the responsibility goes to the bigger occupant of that premises. But that's not always the case, is it?
No, that's true. Yeah, you could rent one small room in a large property,
in an office block or whatever.
I'm thinking of like bus companies that rent
Yes.
small individual mess rooms in the middle of a village, because on the route that's the only place that their bus drivers can stop and have a break.
Yeah.
So they'll rent a room in a property that's not theirs. However, like you say, they still need to make sure that that room is safe for their people to access. And it's that kind of thing. It's like, is that our asset? Well, strictly speaking, no, because you don't own it. However, is it an asset that you use? Yes. Well, again, what's a tenancy agreement? But there's 2 things at play. There's a tenancy agreement, which places the official
Duty to manage,
responsibility on the duty holder. But also there's you as an employer with the duty to care. And we've all got a duty to care to look after one another and our employees. And again, if that information isn't forthcoming from the official duty holder, well, you don't just kind of draw a line and go, oh, well, they wouldn't give it to me. They said, no, we're not going to get a survey done. It falls back to you to, again, make sure that everything is safe. So even if you are in a property where you're not the official duty holder per se, you've still got that duty of care to make sure that that location is safe, it's fit for purpose, it isn't exposing anyone to asbestos. Yeah, that covers a whole host of them.
I think the message is kind of like, just take a step back. Don't just go off your everyday list that you know and you remember. It's looking at your whole portfolio, all the areas and locations, buildings, structures that you own and occupy, and even access.
And I think the message definitely it is taking that step back and taking it back to what I said at the beginning about the conversation I had with a client recently is in their mind, they thought they were hunky-dory. They were tip-top. They really did believe they had everything in place because all they wanted us to do was, you just need to take over inspections. That was it. However, like you say, it is take that step back. It doesn't matter. You've been doing it the same way for the last 10 years, 20 years, whatever. Take that step back every once in a while and just have that consideration and think about, are we doing everything? Is everything in line? Have things changed? Big businesses change all the while and the property portfolios change all the while. So again, I would probably do this once a year in line with the asbestos management plan review and the re-inspection, which again, that's stage 5, the health check that we carry out in the asbestos antidote. And within that, that's the time you kind of take stock of what's happened before, what's happened in the previous 12 months, and take that into consideration and just kind of think, do I need to act on that or not?
Yeah. And this is not just an asbestos. You know, obviously we always talk about asbestos, but this applies to all kind of compliance.
Yeah, there's a lot of business risks out there.
This will apply to lots of different stuff. So it's not just the asbestos element to think about. So you won't be just doing, it's not just a one-trick thing. This applies to all compliance. Right, I hope you found that useful. Remember, asbestos first, not last.